You are listening to the first segment of our four-part series, Herbal Tonics with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome to Time Monk Radio.
Hello, Gemini. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Well, we're glad to have you join us, and tonight we're going to be discussing spring tonics or herbal tonics.
Yes, we're going to be looking at the idea of tonics and getting some sense of what's meant by tonics and how we can use tonics in our life, how they might benefit us, and both in terms of good health and in terms of longevity.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So, there is actually a lot of confusion about tonics, the word tonics and what it means, and that confusion is very deeply rooted in herbal medicine, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about herbal tonics and just tonics in general. And, when I'm talking about tonics at a class, what I say to the people in class is, please turn to someone and give them a hug. But since you may be driving, please don't turn to anybody. What I'd like you to do is to give yourself a hug right now. Just take your arms and give yourself a nice big hug. Tell yourself how much I love you. And then I want to ask you, can anybody take that hug away? Well, no. What a foolish question, Susan. Of course not. So what we know is that hug is nourishment. Nourishment is something that when you get it, it's yours forever. Nothing can ever really take it away. You get one hug, you got that hug. Well, could you get another hug? Yes. Could you get more if you got another hug? Of course. So nourishment isn't limited to individual single episodes, but neither does it require repetition in order to get nourished. Tonification, however, does require repetition. If I decided that I wasn't in good tone, that my cardiovascular tone wasn't good, or that my muscle tone wasn't good, I might decide to go for a run. And if I decided to go for a 10-mile run all in one morning, well, I'd probably kill myself. But if instead I broke that up and ran half a mile every week for 20 weeks, I would get a lot of tone. So tonification and tonics are dependent on repetition, unlike nourishment. Now, the confusion is not often between nourishing and tonifying because these are clearly, to most people, pretty different things, although tonification adds to the functioning of the organ or the organism, and nourishment adds to the organ or the organism. So they're both additive processes. They both, the more they're engaged in, the more we nourish, the more we tonify, the more we get from doing it. Tonification, of course, many people think of as exercise, but there are tonic herbs as well that tonify all of our bodily systems, whether that's the cardiovascular system, the hormonal system, the immune system, the reproductive system. Every part of ourselves can be affected by tonic herbs. And where the confusion comes in is that tonic herbs increase the functioning of the organ or the organism, but stimulants increase the functioning of the organ or the organism too. So how do you tell the difference between a stimulant herb and a tonic herb? Well, generations of herbalists didn't make much of a distinction between them at all. As a matter of fact, many of the great classics of herbal medicine that are still consulted list under the section for tonics nothing but stimulating herbs. Now, when we think about stimulus, it seems pretty benign. We think, well, a cup of coffee, wakes me up in the morning. And I'm certainly not anti-coffee. Coffee is an herb and has some tremendous health benefits, especially for the brain, the memory, and the nervous system, so long, of course, as we don't overdo it. But what I'm saying is that coffee is a stimulant more than it is a tonic. And that stimulants basically undercut our core energy. So the more often we use stimulants to prop ourselves up and give ourselves energy, the less overall energy we tend to have, and thus the more we need the stimulants, and the more we need the stimulants, the less core energy we have, and the less core energy we have, the more stimulants. And you can see pretty easily how this gets to be an addictive affair, whereas with tonics, certainly the more we work with tonics, the stronger we become. But if we take the tonic away, unlike if we take the stimulant away, we don't suffer a withdrawal. We don't suffer a diminishment. Nourishment comes in individual packets, and we have it, and it's ours forever. Tonification requires repetition in order for us to get it, but once we got it, we pretty much have it. Stimulus, like nourishment, comes in individual packets. You can get some stimulus from one intake of a stimulant. So it's the tonification there that really rests on and requires that we understand it as a moving, cyclical, rhythmical thing. And we think about that distinction that I've been making between the organ or the organism and the functioning of the organ or the organism. So if we just look at the heart and we just want to see the anatomy of the heart, which is the organ, well, it can be in formaldehyde. It doesn't really matter. But if we want to see the functioning of the heart, what we're looking at, what we're talking about, heart tonics, or tonics to the cardiovascular system, then we need to see that heart alive. We need to see it moving, and we need to understand what a rhythmical, toned heartbeat looks like. One of the things that I was just reading about, which I find fascinating, is that if you have your pulse taken, say you go to a medical doctor and they take your pulse, you'll notice that usually they count for about 15 seconds, and then they multiply that by 4 to get what your pulse is over a 60-second span, or this number of beats per minute, which is how it's usually registered. Now, if we take an electronic device that doesn't just count the number of pulses, but actually measures the interval in between those pulses, then we find that things like, their pulse rate is 70, your pulse rate is 80 or 90, that these are actually not as important information or as interesting information as the actual space between the pulses. And so long as that space between the pulses varies, and it varies in an orderly way, then the greater the swing between that variance, the healthier the cardiovascular system overall is. So tonification is that which gives us more swing in the variance of being alive, and thus makes us healthier overall and grants us greater longevity as well. Let's think about this rhythm for a minute, because I find it pretty easy for most people to imagine the rhythm of the heart beating. We know that goes something like thump, 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 thump. And that if we were to listen to the heart and we heard thump, 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 well, that's pretty good jazz, but it's not good for a heartbeat. So we don't want to have an irregular rhythm. A regular rhythm constitutes health, and an irregular rhythm for most of us constitutes a disease state, a problem, a state away from what we would consider healthy. Now, you can't put a stethoscope up to your nervous system and listen and see if your nervous system is going, or if your nervous system is going, but you can feel it, can't you? You know the difference between when the parts of your body are functioning and moving in rhythmical ways and when they're not. And many modern people have lost the regular rhythms that living on planet Earth gives us. Living on planet Earth gives us the rhythm of light and dark, day and night. And that's a rhythm that most modern human beings simply and totally ignore. We turn on light as soon as it gets dark, and we keep the light on as long as we want to. We don't have that imposed rhythm of light and dark as it changes throughout the year. And of course, some of the most significant changes in that light and dark are the longest day and the longest night. And those particular times seem to be very important timing for us as rhythmical beings. So what happens is that the herbs can step in and, in a way, make up for the lack of the timing that our ancestors had, that we have, for better or worse, set aside and made every day pretty much the same in terms of day and night, light and dark, and that rhythms of that rhythm, instead of becoming a rhythm that changes, a rhythm that we can actually use for health, becomes a very boring every single this is what it is. I actually found that when I visited the tropics. The sun came up at the same time every day and went down at the same time every evening. And it was like, oh, my goodness, I'm so used to being at a latitude away from the equator where I have this variance, this dance that to me allows such wonderful health. And that dance which is aided and abetted by the tonics. Now, in fact, there are so many tonic herbs that they constitute, in many ways, one of the largest classes of herbs that there are. Nowadays, some people, rather than speaking about tonic herbs, speak about adaptogenic herbs. And adaptogenic herbs are herbs that help us to adapt to our environment. Not all tonic herbs are adaptogens, but virtually all adaptogens are indeed tonics, and none of them are stimulants. In each of my 5 books that I have out, with the exception of my big green book, Healing Wise, my book starts with a brief overview of, shall we say, the kinds of herbs that there are. And I divide those herbs into 4 general categories: nourishing herbs, tonifying herbs, stimulating, sedating herbs, and potentially poisonous herbs. And this is what I have to say about tonifying herbs. Tonifying herbs act slowly. They have a cumulative rather than an immediate effect. Tonifying herbs build the functional ability of an organ like the liver, or a system like the immune system, or of the entire organism. Tonifying herbs are most beneficial when they are used in small quantities for extended periods of time. Side effects occasionally occur with tonifying herbs, but are usually quite short-term and rarely damaging. Many older herbals, as we talked about earlier, mistakenly equate stimulating herbs with tonifying herbs, leading to widespread misuse of many herbs and severe side effects. So if you take a stimulant herb thinking it's a tonic herb and that there won't be side effects, you may have a whoops there as you discovered that you've really been using a stimulating herb. Tonics are generally safe to take with drugs, and they are usually prepared in water, vinegar, or alcohol. So tonic herbs can be prepared in water, that would be teas, or infusions. They can be prepared in vinegar, making a medicinal herbal vinegar, or in alcohol, which makes a tincture. Occasionally, Tonic herbs are put up in honey, but water, vinegar, and alcohol are the primary mediums that are used to get tonic herbs into the body. Tonic herbs can be further subdivided into soothing tonics, bitter tonics, astringent tonics, and food tonics. Soothing tonics are also called bland tonics, and soothing or bland tonics are often used in great quantity, and they are the closest, of course, to the nourishing herbs. In fact, of course, it's human beings who like to say these herbs do this and these herbs do that. It's not nature who does that. So if you prepare an herb in a different way, it will have a slightly different effect. And we talked about those three solvents: water, vinegar, and alcohol. Alcohol bringing out, shall we say, the greatest amount of potential poison from the plant, and therefore making it furthest away from the nourishing, and the water bringing out more of the nourishing qualities, and thereby having it be closer to nourishing. So our soothing tonics, such as astragalus root, burdock root, calendula flowers, cleaver's herb, echinacea root, eleuthero root, fenugreek seeds, goldenrod herb, passion flower herb, hawthorn herb and berries, and usnea herb can be used in great quantity, and they can be used regularly without any harm coming. Now, you might have picked echinacea out of that list because it's certainly an herb that a lot of people know about. And it is an anti-infective herb, but that doesn't mean that it's not a tonic as well. As a bland tonic, as a soothing tonic, echinacea does indeed need to be used in very large quantity. And I find that this is often the reason that people do not get the anti-infective power that echinacea has to offer, because they simply haven't been thinking of it as something that needs to be taken in quantity. What do I mean by in quantity? Divide your body weight by 2. That number is the number of drops of echinacea that you will take as a dose. That's right, 50% of your body weight equals the number of drops of echinacea. Now, just for ease in working with it, echinacea or any other tincture is about 25 drops in a dropper full. So you can round whatever you got up to the nearest 25, and that will be the number of dropperfuls. So if you weigh 150 pounds, and you divide that by 2, that's 75. That would be 3 dropperfuls of echinacea tincture. And that can be taken as frequently as every hour or 2 at the acute onset of an infective disease. Now, because echinacea works so well when there is an infection, myself and many other herbalists have felt that it was best simply to restrict it to use when there was infection. But a large study recently completed in Switzerland found a true tonic effect from taking a rather smaller amount of echinacea on a daily basis. The company makes a patented form of echinacea, and of course, they would say that the study only showed that their patented form of echinacea would be effective. But I certainly believe that any echinacea would be effective, and they did give, in a placebo-controlled double-blind study, people either their echinacea tincture or a tincture that didn't contain echinacea. And the people who got a dropper full of echinacea tincture on a daily basis were, I think, a third less likely to get the flu and half again as likely to get colds. So there were some pretty significant results there from that. And someone said to me, it's rather like giving antibiotics to healthy animals to keep them healthier. I said, well, no, because echinacea itself, although it's often called an herbal antibiotic, is not actually an antibiotic. It doesn't actually interact directly with the bacteria. What echinacea does is it tonifies the immune system, and it helps the immune system to then deal with bacterial infections. And since it does seem to have an effective protective effect against colds and flus, it also seems to help the immune system learn how to recognize and deal with viruses as well. Now, people have said to me, well, echinacea stimulates the immune system, doesn't it? And this is where our learning previously is going to come in really handy, because we can say, well, no, it doesn't stimulate the immune system, because things that stimulate the immune system would wind up making the immune system weaker. What echinacea does is it tonifies the immune system, and it makes the immune system work better. And because it's a soothing tonic, it makes the immune system calmer too. Now, many people haven't thought about their immune system, whether it's calm or whether it's active or whether it's hyperactive. As a matter of fact, you hear people all the time going, stimulate the immune system, stimulate the immune system. And you think, poor immune system. You know, it keeps getting jostled and jabbed and stirred up. Well, in fact, when the immune system gets too jostled and jabbed and stirred up, then it starts, oh dear, turning on the body. It lives in and it starts creating havoc. And we call these the autoimmune diseases. And there are a great variety of autoimmune diseases, from type 1 diabetes, where the immune system basically destroys the pancreas so that it can no longer produce insulin, or Crohn's disease, where the immune system attacks the intestines and causes eating to be quite terrible, or Hashimoto's disease, where the immune system attacks the thyroid. There are all kinds of problems occurred by stimulating the immune system, and if we wind up with a hyperactive immune system, we can also wind up with allergies and a variety of other problems. So far better to tonify the immune system rather than to stimulate it. And thus, echinacea, a soothing immune system tonic, is actually ideal for people who are dealing with autoimmune diseases. Have you ever been around a child who is kind of exhausted? And the more exhausted that child got, the more hyper they got, until they were bouncing off the walls and screaming. And yet really all they wanted to do is just lay down and go to sleep, but they just couldn't let themselves. Well, that's the immune system on overdrive. That's the superstimulated immune system. That's the immune system that goes around eating pieces of our bodies. It really just wants to rest. And echinacea really helps it to rest. So that's just one of the soothing tonics. And next week, I'm going to be focusing in on those soothing tonics. Bitter tonics and astringent tonics are going to be our focus for our third week, or 2 weeks from now. We're going to look at the great group of bitter or astringent tonics, including buchu, dandelion, cronewort, elecampane, fennel, ginseng, milk thistle, motherwort, saw palmetto, black tea, green tea, vitex, wild yam, yellow dog, ginkgo, ground ivy, and the astringent tonics, American ash, aspen, avens, barberry, bistorch, black hawk, coptis, crane's bill, couchgrass, horsetail, oak bark, Oregon grape, self-heal, shepherd's purse, tormentil, witch hazel, lady's mantle, lemon balm, mullein, and raspberry leaf. And then our last week together is going to be my favorite, which is food tonics. And those would include things such as turmeric, garlic, ginger, maitake, pomegranate, seaweed, mild mushroom, schisandra, and everything in the cabbage family. When I'm focusing on spring tonics and really looking at the tonics that are available to us in the spring, then I often focus quite a bit on the cabbage family and the garlic onion family. Those are some plants that are up and growing very first thing in the spring, and they have lots and lots of members. So just about anywhere you are on planet Earth, you can find something in the onion or garlic family and something in the mustard cabbage family, and bring those into your diet in the spring. I asked a Native American elder to talk to me about spring tonics and what would be kind of behind the idea of spring tonics. And she said, well, imagine it, Imagine that you are living in a longhouse over the winter and your heat is coming from wood fires. And there aren't any chimneys. There are simply open wood fires. And although there are small holes in the roof of the longhouse, and it is certainly tall enough to stand up in, nonetheless, you are pretty much in that smoke throughout the winter time. So she says you certainly need some spring tonics to get you breathing better as well. Plus, she says, it's just not easy to do a lot of bathing when the weather is really harsh outside. She said, all Native peoples value and cherish running water and the ability to jump into running water, but if it's frozen, and throughout much of the winter in the area where she lived, the water was quite frozen, there's not much you can do about it. She said, so in the spring, you kind of needed a tonic to get your skin healthy again, And she said your eyes had gotten dim also from the lack of light. So she said you just wanted a tonic to get everything going and to get everything feeling real good again. So cabbage and onions, wonderful spring tonics, but dandelion as well. Wherever you are, perhaps there's some dandelion by you. Dandelion is an everyday tonic, and it is the world's leading spring tonic as well. I remember my friend Peter Gale, who does a lot with wild foods, was asking people about various wild food recipes, and he realized that almost all the recipes he was getting were for dandelion, and he began to really focus in on dandelion and even to have dandelion cook-offs, because dandelion is such a giving herb and offers us so much wonderful healing and tonification. If you want to know more about dandelion, you could check out all the information, because dandelion is one of the 7 plants in my big green book for everybody, Healing Wise. I also talk about dandelion quite a bit in Breast Cancer ? Breast Health ! The Wise Woman Way, because dandelion is a tremendous tonic ally to those who are worried about cancer, those who've been diagnosed with cancer, or those who are undergoing treatment for cancer. So you'll find a lot of information about tonics in that particular book as well. And all of my books are available at the Wise Woman Bookshop. And you can navigate over to wisewomanbookshop.com, and there you'll find Wise Woman Herbal for the childbearing year. You'll find the book I just mentioned, Breast Cancer ? Breast Health ! The Wise Woman Way, and Healing Wise, my big green herbal for everyone with several tonic herbs that we're going to be talking about this month. Also, New Menopausal Years, The Wise Woman Way, often considered a menopause Bible by millions of women worldwide. And my latest book, Down There, everything you need to know about what's below your belt, The Wise Woman Way. And you can also find out about my other offerings. I have an online university. There's 30 different teachers there, and that includes myself. I have programs on herbal first aid, programs on menopause, and my favorite, Drink Your Way to Health, with nourishing herbal infusions. Also, at the Wise Woman Bookshop, you will be able to see my correspondence courses. And I offer a variety of correspondence courses, which come with books, audio-visual materials, talk time with me, and a wide variety of resources as well as experiments that you can engage in. And come and visit me at www.susanweed.com. I have a big website, lots of free information, and you can be part of my special mentor group. I am mentoring students, and that means talking with you and helping guide you along the way, and you can find out more about that at www.susanweed.com. So we've gotten off to a good start on the tonics, and I will be back with you next week to delve deeper into the mysteries of herbal tonics. Green blessings from Susun Weed.
Thank you, Susan. Next week, we'll look forward to hearing your topic of soothing tonics. This completes the first segment of our four-part series, Herbal Tonics with Susun Weed, at Time Monk Radio.